Ja, Miss Graham.
Thank you. Which page was on? 20. Sorry, I'm just finding my right page. I think that's fine. I'm fine. No, I've gone through that. I think it's page 20. Right, could I ask you to look please at Perk 254. So this is the second, that's the document ID number. This is the statement given on the 4th of June 2015 at Ochterharder. And I'd like to look at the final page, please. And you'll see that the penultimate paragraph or the final paragraph on page 9, I would like to make it clear. So that's on the screen at the moment. And it says, I wish to add, also in relation to P16, I wish to add as Shekubaya was walking away from me, he was out of control, too aggressive. He was not the type of person who you like to allow to walk the streets. I felt he was hell-bent on hurting somebody. I mean by this anybody who was coming along and came into contact with him. And that was something you wanted to add to the statement. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you wanted this to be added?
I just wanted to really put across like really how it was from my perspective, and that I really felt that he posed a large risk to members of the public, and I didn't want anybody innocently coming around the corner and coming across him along, and that goes for what we experienced when we encountered Mr. Bio, and obviously the calls for the witnesses that dialed 999.
And when you said he was not the type of person who you like to allow to walk the streets, what did you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that basically well, for me, the public phoned us because they felt unsafe. They witnessed a man in possession of a knife. They phoned us to respond to that, to then investigate that, I suppose, and make the area safe again. I wasn't content, I suppose, with just simply letting him walk away. We still had to eliminate whether he was a danger or not, but he simply didn't give us the chance to do that.
So when you said the type of person, are you talking about someone who's said to be in possession of a knife?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to look at Perk 255, which is your third statement dated the 9th of June. And this is the one that was given in the Police Federation offices in Livingston on the 9th of June to Investigator John Ferguson and DSI Hedrick. Can I ask you to look at page 2, please? And paragraph 5, so that's towards the middle of the page. I've been asked if I can recall the point I spoke earlier of when I was curled up on the ground. I remember having a conscious feeling of not being able to get up. I can say I had a sore body, i.e. my side and my hips. I had the wind knocked out of me. My utility belt had also dug into my hips, so my hips were sore. I do not recall strikes to my body whilst I was lying on the ground. I feel that Shekubayo was somehow trying to stop me getting up, but I can't say how. Can I ask you, the reference to utility belt, is that the reference to the belt that we were talking about earlier? And where had it dug into your hips?
I just kind of felt where my spray and my baton hold, just that kind of general area.
Just your hip area on both sides?
Yeah.
Right. And that was causing your hips to be sore? Both hips? Thank you. Where they'd dug in?
Yeah.
Can I ask you to look at paragraph 6, please? So that's just the one down below, just under there. Oh, sorry, on page 3. So it's towards the bottom of page 3, paragraph 6. And this is after you've gone back to Kirkcaldy Police Office.
Yeah.
I sat down with my team, they asked me how I was, I explained I was sore. I said what happened to me after he punched me. PC Tomlinson said he was stamping and kicking at you every time you tried to get up. I knew he meant Shekubayo when he spoke of this. And so it was PC Tomlinson that had that conversation with you.
Yeah.
Was that in the canteen?
It was, yeah. I sat down and I just had pain elsewhere in my body that along with the pain where I was aware he punched me.
And we see there in that final paragraph, in quotation marks, he was stamping and kicking at you every time you tried to get up. Is that your recollection when you gave this statement, what PC Tomlinson said?
Yes.
Thank you. And can I ask you to look at page 3 of your affidavit? So the affidavit is from the 30th of August, 2018. And if we're on page 3, I'm interested in paragraph 6. Now, this is quite a long paragraph. So I'll read out what it is I want to ask you questions about. But you'll see this one starts in response to the escalating situation. And then you give some information. And I'm interested in the expression that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 8 lines down. Or 7 lines down. I have never seen anything like it before. He was like a zombie. I'd like to ask you about your use of the word zombie and what it is. Have you found that on the page? Sorry, it's quite a long paragraph. So I'd like to ask you about your use of the word zombie and why you used that word.
I think that was just used in a description to the lack of, I said earlier, nothing was going in, nothing of what we were saying seemed to be getting any response whatsoever. And by that I mean any kind of facial expressions, any body language, no communication. There was just nothing, and really that.
When you used that word there, zombie, was there any part of that reference to the fact that he was black?
No.
Okay. Can we move up, please, to the final line of paragraph 6 in the affidavit? And then you'll see it says, I did not feel him hitting me again, and I'm not sure that I was conscious, but I was later told that he stamped on me at least 3 times. And again, is that a reference to what PC Tomlinson told you, or is that in relation to someone else?
I can't remember exactly. I just remember the emphasis being put on when I first tried to get up. he stamped on me, and then he was continuing to until he was stopped. I don't, obviously, I'm just trying to piece together, fill in the blanks essentially. Yeah.
So this is what your understanding of what you were told somebody else witnessed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, do you remember when we talked about the events earlier? I said we'll be able to come back and fine-tune things. Well, Mr. Di Giovanni has been preparing some images that I'd really appreciate if you would look at.
Yeah.
And we can, he's going to hopefully be able to do that now. I don't know if he needs a break or if he's happy to move straight into this. And you'll know that we can move things around until you're comfortable with them. But they're still images, they're not moving images. So they're snapshots, if you like, of what you described earlier. Now there's 4 I'm going to go through with you. And the first one you'll see shows the transit van and the fish van.
Yeah.
And you'll see on the left beside the fish van, there's now a character, a blue character there with the name PC Short. So that's designed to demonstrate yourself. And then you'll see there's 3 other characters. 2 PC Peyton and PC Walker are also in blue, and then Mr. Bio in green. Do you see those?
Yeah.
So let's just go through it, everybody, so I can make sure you're comfortable, that it's a reasonable indication of where people were.
Yeah.
Can we start with yourself, please? PC Short. Is that a reasonable indication of where you were standing at the fish van? Or
Yes.
would you like to move that?
No, that's accurate.
You're quite comfortable
Yeah.
with that? And in terms of the direction in which you were facing, are you happy with the...
Hey, could you zoom out again just to...
Yeah, let's go down and see.
Yeah.
You happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. And then if we can look at PC Peyton now, please. Now, again, you'll see that he's been positioned, you see the bus stop at Hayfield Road.
Yeah.
And the yellow markings are on there, and the van. Can you tell us, are you comfortable with where PC Peyton is in relation to your recollection when you were standing on Hayfield Road? Or would you like to move that?
I thought he was a wee bit further back.
Okay,
PC
well, we'll
Peyton.
just do that now. So closer to the van.
Yeah. Yeah. But on front of PC Walker, because I could still, so kind
Okay.
of where I'm standing, I would still see the 2 of them type of thing.
Yeah. So does that look more realistic? Are
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
But you think PC Walker was closer to the van, did you say?
No, if you just... he's fine where he is.
He's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Bio, would you like to adjust his position?
I've just got a memory of him being on the grass, so that's fine.
Okay. Right. If we could maybe have a look at, there's an indication, a facility on this 3D reconstruction that allows us to see an indication of your line of sight.
Yeah.
So let's look at that, and then you can further adjust
Yeah.
things
Okay.
once you see that. So if we could maybe move to your line of sight. So that's from the character who's positioned beside the fish van.
Right. I could see Craig more clearly, so maybe, PC Walker more clearly, so maybe move him back towards the van.
Move him a little
Right.
bit closer to the van. But
Yeah.
in terms of PC Peyton's position, are you happy with that?
Yeah.
Right. So PC Walker a little bit closer to the van. And again, could we maybe have a look at PC Short's line of sight? Does that...
Yeah.
And in terms of Mr. Bio's position?
Yeah. I'm fine with that.
So looking at that image 1, are you comfortable with the way that is a reasonable indication of what you could see when you were at the fish van?
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's move on to image 2, please. And this should show the path.
Okay.
And there's a couple of positions here that you've described, so we'll go through this
Yeah,
slowly.
okay.
It takes a minute to load all of this up onto the screen, so we'll just give this a moment. You can see the different layers building up.
Mhm.
Right. And you can already see on the screen that there's the fish vans there at the bottom of the screen. And your position is there beside the fish van.
Mhm.
Now you'll see that Mr. De Giovanni has put in a green character for Mr. Bio, both towards the beginning of the path and then further on up the path. And I just want to check, are you comfortable with the position that Mr. Bio is at the end of the path, or the furthest point along the path to which you reached? If we can just see that.
Yeah. See.
You had pointed, you'd drawn
Yeah.
an arrow, I
Yeah.
think, in the original image.
Right. So you're asking if I'm happy with the positioning in Mr. Bio initially? Yeah,
You happy?
I'm happy with
And
that.
at the furthest point along the path?
Yeah.
You happy with that?
Yeah.
And then we see that you are positioned both beside the fish van, where you were before, but then there's also, I think on the original image earlier today, you pointed with an arrow,
Mhm.
and you said you were you'd moved into the trees.
Yeah.
And during that period, you'd been mirroring Mr. Bio walking along the path.
Yeah.
Are you content that the PC short blue character there near the tree is a reasonable indication of the point you reached as you were mirroring Mr. Bio? Or would you like that moved?
No, that's fine.
That's fine. And then I think you also talked about PC Tomlinson. And again, looking at the image of PC Tomlinson there, are you comfortable that that's a reasonable indication?
Yeah.
And then you also spoke about PC Walker. And you said, in fairness to you, I don't think you said you were sure, but you pointed to an area on the screen. Again, are you comfortable that where we see PC Walker there is where you remember PC Walker?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And then let's move on to the third image. Now this should be showing the area where you were talking about using your baton and then the fall,
Yeah.
when you fell on the ground. And again, it'll take a few moments to load everything onto the screen. And again, with this image 3, you'll see you spoke about you being behind the fish van, or to the rear of that, Mr. Bio being there, and you talked about him being an arm's length from you,
Yeah.
and you pulling your baton. Looking at that image, and those two characters there, do you feel they're a reasonable indication
Yeah.
of where you were?
Yeah.
And then you spoke about moving across Hayfield Road to where the houses were, and you pointed to where you were when you were struck, and then when you landed on the ground.
Yeah.
Now again, you'll see that Mr. Di Giovanni has created characters of you, and there's a PC short brackets run, and then there's an image of someone lying on the ground. Are those a reasonable indication of your position?
Is the PC short run, is that where I've said, like, I was hit, punched, or because I pretty much ran from where the figure is in front of Mr. Bio in the green?
Yeah.
Uh,
And where would you want to indicate on the screen where you were struck, where you were when you were struck?
oh,
Do you feel that's...
that's okay.
So the PC short run, do you feel that's a reasonable indication of where you were when you were struck, or do you want to move that?
Probably is, because I remember only getting like running a couple of strides. I feel like if that before he punched me, I was just wanting to make sure that's what I meant. And that was all.
Right. But you're quite happy with the position, and the direction that that character's facing. Are you happy with that? Do you want to adjust it in any way?
No, it's just I'm just trying to think. It's I'm happy with that.
You're happy with that? I mean, do you want to see the line of sight from that character? Would that help?
Yeah, I just pretty much felt like I saw my arms length away from me, and then I turned right around and just ran.
Okay.
So I guess that would make it if the one in the middle of the road was. I suppose I'm thinking I ran in a straight line, which may not have been the case, but it's the positionings are fine. I'm just trying to think, like, how did I run?
Because if you wanted to move any of these characters, you can do so.
Yeah. For my memory, if we could move the one in the middle of the road just up to behind the one with Mr. Bio,
Yeah.
because that's kind of what I'm.
So more in line with...
Yeah, just
Mr.
a bit
Bio.
closer. Yeah.
Well, Mr. De Giovanni, I'll move that closer, and you can maybe say stop when you want him to stop.
Stop. And then up over here. Keep going.
Keep going, please.
That'll do. Yeah. That's fine.
Is that a better position?
Yeah.
And then do you want to move... You'll see the character flat on the ground. Do you want to move that character as well?
No,
No.
that's fine.
So you're happy that that's the direction you were running, you were struck, and then you landed roughly in that position on the ground?
Roughly, yeah.
And was your head sort of towards the pavement and your legs towards the grass area?
Yeah.
Are you reasonably comfortable that you were straight like that, or do you feel you were more at an angle, or do you want to change the position at all?
No, that's fine.
You're happy with that, thank you. And then we'll move on to the final image, image 4. And this will show you the fish van.
Okay.
And just to be clear, so the fish van's there. You are positioned to the rear of the fish van near the driver's side. Are you comfortable that that's where you ran to first, or do you feel you want to adjust that?
Could you adjust it to be just beside the at the passenger side, but still at the rear of the van, like further to onto the yeah.
Right. And are you comfortable with the
Yeah.
direction that's facing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you described the position of Mr. Bio, and again, Mr. De Giovanni has created a green character on the road and the pavement there. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Do you want to adjust that in any way?
No.
And then you talked about moving from the rear of the fish van over to the transit van. And again, we see a character, a blue character at the transit van. Do you want to tell us where you were in relation to the transit van?
I seem to remember the transit van being a wee bit further forward, and I was standing next to a tree on the grass. So if I could move that to on the grassy area, but just
We'll maybe just look more closely at that. So we
Yeah.
can see a tree on the grassy area. And are you more comfortable with that position, or do you?
yeah, that's fine.
And then what direction were you facing?
Could you zoom out because the van was blocking my view when I turned around, so
Would you like to see the line of sight from that person?
yeah, because I might be a wee bit further up towards the shelter.
Right.
Yeah, see, if you move me further up, well, and then again, if the van was further in.
Does that help you position yourself?
Yeah, because could I see the line of sight on that? Aye, the transit van was blocking my view. I couldn't see across the road.
Okay. But is how far were you from the tree?
I remember being near it, feeling like I was under the tree, but that's just my memory just now, you know.
But certainly by the time you got to the transit van,
Yeah.
you felt your view was blocked.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but your recollection now is that you were nearer the tree.
Yeah, I was aware of the branches being overhead type thing, so yeah.
All right. So closer to the tree than to the van.
What was that?
Closer to the tree than to the van.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then at some point you actually got into the front passenger seat of the van.
Yeah.
In any event. And your recollection, when you were at that stage, you couldn't see what was happening further down Hayfield Road.
That's right, yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Right, I'd like to move on now, please, and ask you some questions about when you went to the hospital.
Okay.
So in paragraph 22 of your statement to the inquiry, you mention that on arrival at Victoria Hospital, so paragraph 22, I saw Nurse Leanne McLaughlin. And you see, she states that I did not know if I had been knocked out. That is true, I didn't know. My hand was all over the place. Do you want to make a change to that?
Yeah, I think that's meant to say my head was all over the place.
Head was all over
Yeah.
the place. And I only learned later from my colleagues that I had been unconscious after being struck by Shekabayo, and that's what you've said earlier.
Yeah.
Right. So you've told us earlier that you were, at this point, when you've arrived at Victoria Hospital, you didn't know what your colleagues subsequently told you about being knocked unconscious or being stamped on.
No.
You didn't know either of those things. And so you certainly didn't tell Nurse McLaughlin those things at that point. And then can I ask you to look at paragraph 23, and you say you were subsequently seen by Dr. Mitchell. And again, when you saw Dr. Mitchell, you didn't know either of those things at that stage. So can you explain to us, paragraph 23, you say that Dr. Mitchell's discounting the possibility of my loss of consciousness because of my ability to recall events prior to and after the incident, I would state the following. In actual fact, I couldn't remember many of the details of the incidents, and because of my mental state, I didn't realise it whilst in hospital. I told the doctor at the time that I knew I wasn't speaking properly, but she discounted that for some reason. Can you explain to the chair what you meant when you said I wasn't speaking normally?
I felt like I wasn't saying the right words. I felt that I was slurring a lot. I just knew that that wasn't normal for me, and how I'd been before. And I tried to tell her that, but she said that I sounded fine to her.
Right. And then you talk about in the next paragraph 24, you were staying alone and not with someone else, and you lived in your own house at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Could you just explain what the significance of that was?
I think she'd said in one of her statements that she thought I was going home to stay with my mum and dad. But I wouldn't have been because they were going away on holiday early the next day, and I had my own house. So
she made an assumption about you.
yeah.
And then can we look at the next paragraph, please? Paragraph 25. And you've looked at Dr. Mitchell's statement to the inquiry, and she says she was able to discount the loss of consciousness due to my ability to recall events pre and post event. Her theory is completely discounted, as I definitely did lose consciousness, as confirmed by my colleagues who witnessed it, and I would otherwise rely on Mr. Anderson to explain differences on medical opinion. So really, you're not a medic.
No.
You're going to rely on other medics to help the chair with this part. Thank you. But can I have a look at Perk 255, please, just before we leave this? So this is the statement that you gave on the 9th of June 2015. And page 3, please. And you say you've been shown A&E notes stated the 3rd of May in your name, and an entry made on page 1 which makes reference to the doctor's entry of what I said. This was an accurate account of what I said. So you've looked at the A&E notes, and maybe we could look at those at the moment. Perk 01158. This is it, and the date you can see is 3/5/15, and it's 8:10 in the morning. And it says Mitchell FY2, and that's a reference to Dr. Mitchell. And then it says 29 and police officer, and that was your age at the time. And then there's a description given there: chased by a member of the public this morning, sustained blows to the back of the head, remembers falling and putting arms out to save herself, curled up into a ball, and was then lifted by one of colleagues and told to sit in police van. No vomit since incident, now has occipital headache. And that was an accurate, you said that was an accurate account of what was said.
Mm-hmm.
Said by you to Dr. Mitchell.
Yeah.
Thank you. And can we just look down, please, further down that page? You'll see at B, so a few lines above that it says OE, which we may hear says on examination. Did Dr. Mitchell give you an examination?
Yeah.
And was it just you and Dr. Mitchell, or was there anyone else in the room?
Yeah, I think it was just me and the doctor.
Just you.
Yeah.
And did she ask you to remove parts of your uniform for that examination?
Yeah, I was given a gown to put on, a hospital gown.
A hospital gown?
Yeah.
Are those the ones that tie at the back?
Yeah, yeah.
And then at B, no chest pain, no obvious injury to chest, and then percussion resonant throughout. And then can we go further down, please? And then at D, abdo SNT, so we may hear that's a reference to abdominal. No obvious abdominal injury, no abdominal pain. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember having that examination?
I can remember bits of it, but there's blanks in some of it.
Okay. And then you'll see on the next page it says GCS, which we may hear stands for Glasgow Coma Scale, 15 out of 15.
Mm.
Thank you. And then there's other references there. We'll deal with that later. And I can leave those now for the moment. So it doesn't appear that there was any reference to you commenting on an injury or pain or being sore in your abdomen or your chest. Okay. So at that time you weren't making those complaints to Dr. Mitchell?
I was sure that I did. I told her everything that I was feeling, but I passed on that information, but she is the expert type of thing, and if she was saying that there was no obvious injury, I just needed to kind of take that, but I was certainly feeling it, if that makes sense.
Okay. And when you can leave that for one moment, when you went back to Kirkcaldy Police Office after the hospital,
Yeah.
do you remember what time you got back?
No.
If I said to you it was around 11, would you agree with that?
Yeah, it was thereabout, yeah.
So you were in the hospital for a while?
Yeah.
And were you still in uniform?
In the hospital, yeah.
And when you got back to the police office?
Yeah.
And you've told us previously you went to the canteen. Did you go straight there?
No, I went in and then I went up to the sergeant's office, and then I was told everybody else was down in the canteen, so I made my way down there.
Who was the sergeant?
There was somebody was brought in to cover for the team, because so it was a different lady.
Right. And by the time you got back to Kirkcaldy Police Office, who was in charge at that stage?
I saw Chief Inspector Nicole Shepherd. She was the Chief Inspector for the station at that time, I'm sure. She was there, so she would be the kind of highest ranking officer.
Right.
That I saw that day.
And when you got to the canteen, who was there when you got there?
All the team that I'd started with that morning, and one other Federation rep. I can't remember if Amanda Given was there yet. No, I think she was there when I arrived.
Amanda Given, who's
Yeah.
a Federation rep.
Yeah.
In paragraph 29, you were asked by the inquiry team, this is of your inquiry statement, asked what advice or instruction was given to you about not speaking to anyone about the events at Hayfield Road. And there you said, I can't remember anyone saying anything of this nature to me or in my hearing. Does that remain the position today?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you see Inspector K at any time?
No, I don't remember seeing him.
Did you remain in the canteen for the whole day?
Yeah.
Where were you sitting?
When I first went in, there was chairs that were at a dining room table. I just sat down there initially, and then I went and sat on. There was 2 leather couches, and I went and sat on one of them.
Who were you sitting beside?
I remember at one point sitting opposite PC Tomlinson, because that's when I asked him what happened. And then I got told that I'd been getting stamped on. And then I can't honestly remember who else was around me.
Where did you keep your vest that you were wearing?
I kept it on for hours afterwards. I was just too sore to move it, and I was, to be honest, it felt like it was giving me a type of, it was like holding me together in a way.
Mm-hmm. After a few hours and you took it off, where did you put it?
I went to lean it onto the other officer's vest that had been taken off, because basically I would have my radio here, so that would make the weight of the front of the vest like heavier, so you just leaned it onto the other vest.
And we've heard from, and there may be other evidence available to the chair, that vests and equipment were left on the floor and some were lying against a wall. Is that where you placed yours?
Well, I went to place mine there, but it was at that point when I went to lean the front of it against the others that I saw what I'm sure is a footprint mark on the back of my vest.
And that was on the back of your vest?
Yeah.
Could you look at that vest again that we looked at earlier?
Yeah.
And you can point out the area where you saw the mark.
Thanks.
Thank you. So you're on the right hand side of the rear of and was that on the high visibility, the yellow part?
Yeah.
And you're pointing to the right hand side.
Yeah.
Now you're moving your hand up and down from under your armpit to your waist. Was it a particular area or was it just that general area?
Just that general area for what I can remember.
Thank you. When you noticed the mark, what did you do?
I turned to PC Tomlinson and I went, Ash, that, pretty sure I said words similar to that, look, that's a footprint. And he said something along the lines of, like, tell somebody, as in tell somebody senior. So I did that.
Who did you speak to?
I'm sure it was Jane Coombe.
Do you mind telling the chair who that is?
Yeah, I'm sure she was an inspector, don't hold me to that now. And she was brought in to be in the canteen with us. That's about all I can remember.
When did you speak to her?
Immediately after Ash said, after Ash, PC Tomlinson had said, show somebody, I turned round and she was the first person that I saw. So
she was in the canteen
with
you. And where was she when you spoke to her?
Well, when I turned round, she was like, she was the first person I saw.
I think that's Rain.
Yeah.
What time was this that you spoke to her?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. Honestly, I lost all track of time.
What did you say to her?
I just said, I've just spotted this. I'm sure it's a footprint for when I got. Did I say that? I can't say with any great certainty, but I definitely pointed out that I thought that was a footprint.
And what was her reply?
to look after that, put that somewhere safe, that along those sorts of lines.
So what did you do with your vest?
I actually can't remember. I did keep it safe. I kept it. I think I maybe put it on top of one of the tables or something. Face the front of the vest down on the table, and then yeah.
And how long did it remain there?
I don't know, but it was never out of my sight and my possession after that.
And what happened to your vest after that, ultimately?
It was seized.
And when you say seized,
Yeah.
what do you mean?
It was taken possession of by Jane Coombe and another girl, I can't remember her name, placed into brown evidence bags. And that was the case with all my uniform.
Okay, thank you. You all right? Do you want a glass of water?
Yeah.
I'd like to move on to ask you about your status, and I'm really talking about as a witness or as a suspect.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean when I talk about that. You were asked by the inquiry whether you'd been informed of your status being as a witness or as a suspect. And do you remember much about being informed about whether you were a witness or a suspect?
In the canteen.
In the canteen.
I can honestly say that when I got in there, I probably went into my own wee world, and I was trying to come to terms with like what had happened and things. So no, I wasn't aware of much going on around me, to be honest.
So before you left that day
Mhm.
to go home, were you clear about what your status was at that stage?
Not that I was aware of, and it might sound bad, but I just wanted home. It was like, I don't know how to describe it. I was still trying to process what had happened, and that's where my mind was at that point.
Mm-hmm. We've looked earlier today at the first statement you gave, which I think was on the 13th of May, if I remember rightly.
Mm.
And before you gave that statement, 5 days after you gave that, were you asked to give a statement, and did you meet with Detective Chief Inspector Keith Hardy
Mm-hmm.
and Detective Inspector Stuart Wilson? So this was on the 18th of May, so 5 days after you gave your first statement to Mr. Salins
Mhm.
that you've talked about. And during that meeting, were you asked to provide a witness statement? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think they both came out to my house to ask me, and if that's what you're speaking about, yeah, I remember that. I can't mind dates or anything, no.
And you didn't give them a statement that day?
No.
Can you explain why you didn't?
It was based on the legal advice that I'd received, and our status, I'm sure, wasn't known yet.
And was that legal advice from you've talked about your solicitor previously,
Yeah.
Mr. Watson, giving you advice? Thank you. Then going back to your inquiry statement, can we look at paragraph 38, please? And you've been asked a number of questions about what your understanding was about your obligations to complete paperwork.
Mhm.
So we're thinking notebook, use of force form, use of spray form. And I'm wondering, you've said that you didn't consider those things at the time. Did you ever complete your notebook?
No.
And can you explain why?
Again, I was trying to process what had happened to me, and then further trying to process that I had been knocked out and stamped on whilst I'd been unconscious, And I just, I was just, I didn't know whether it was New York or New Year to use a phrase, and it was the furthest thing from my mind. And in terms of paperwork, or further paperwork, there's no computers in the canteen and no hard copies were ever provided to me.
And do we see in paragraph 38 you use the phrase, you became logged out mentally?
Yeah.
Is that how you've just described yourself as feeling?
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of completing use of force forms or use of spray forms, you never used your spray, as I understand it. So you wouldn't have had to have filled out that sort of form.
No.
And use of force forms, you've described the striking with your baton.
Mm-hmm.
You said it didn't connect.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have been obliged to complete a use of force form in those circumstances?
Honestly, can't remember. I'd say to err on the side of caution, perhaps, because I did take it out and kind of present it.
Right.
But like I say, I was never, I didn't go back to work after the 3rd of May. Essentially, that was the last day I worked as a serving police officer, so I was never provided with something to fill out, like a use of force form for that.
Is it fair to say that now, 7 years down the line, you don't remember whether even taking your baton out might trigger that requirement, or it might not?
Yeah.
You're not very sure?
I'm not very sure, no.
And then in paragraph 40 of your statement, you talk about Amanda Given, and you were asked if she had said anything about the completion of paperwork or providing a statement. Do you remember Amanda Given saying anything or giving you any advice on the 3rd of May?
No. Like I say, I was concussed, and I pretty much, I sat down and I sank into that couch that we had in the canteen, and that was it, really.
So equally, do you remember her saying anything to anyone else about paperwork?
No.
Can I ask you about Dr. Norrie, who we may hear is the forced medical examiner?
Okay.
So she was someone that you saw on the 3rd of May, a police there for the police, engaged by the police. And can I ask you to look at some photos, please? We don't need to look through all of them.
Yeah.
But they're SPA 5 and SPA 6. And just look at the first couple so that you'll recognise. Is that you?
Yeah.
On the 3rd of May? And is this SPA?
I think that was that was on the Wednesday, I think, because that's in my house.
So those photographs are taken on
the Wednesday, I'm sure it was, following. So it was the.
So this happened on Sunday the 3rd.
So that would be Wednesday the 6th.
Wednesday the 6th.
But I did sorry.
Can we look at the other photographs as well, please? I don't need to go through all of these photographs, but SPA 6. So these are taken on a different day. You've got your hair tied back on this day.
Mm-hmm.
And what day, do you remember when these photographs were taken?
That was at the police station on the 3rd of May.
These are the...
Yeah.
So SPA 6 were actually the ones taken on the 3rd of May.
Yeah.
And they were taken before or after you saw Dr. Norrie?
After.
After.
Sorry. I was getting mixed up by an there. No, I will stick with after. I'm sure it was afterwards.
Do you remember the time these were taken?
No.
So these were taken on the day itself, your hair tied back. Mm-hmm. And the ones we saw a moment ago were taken on the Wednesday.
Yeah.
So they were the later ones.
Yeah.
Right, so there's 17 photographs taken on the day. and 42, I think, taken on the Wednesday. So was it the same? Oh, sorry, other way around. 42 taken on the day and 17 taken on the Wednesday. Was it the same photographer?
Yeah.
Right. And how did the photographer decide which parts of your body to photograph?
I think for memory it was, where I was struck, where I felt pain. I think. I'm not completely sure though.
And was it the same on both days, that she was trying to take photographs of any injuries that you'd had?
Yeah.
Or where you'd been struck?
Mhm. Yeah.
Or where you felt pain, you said?
Yeah.
So was she getting that information from you
Yeah. Believe so.
on both days?
I'm unaware if anybody else had spoken to her. My memory's honestly hazy about this. I remember getting the photos taken. I remember who it was. I can't honestly remember what I've said to her.
All right. Are you okay to carry on? Are you
yeah.
wanting up? Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I look at Perk 256, please? So this is the statement you gave to John Ferguson over the phone on the 16th of June.
Mhm.
And he was clarifying a few things with you over the phone. And you say that you'd not seen nor have I had photographs taken of any such. Well, I should start at the beginning. Today, 16th of June, I was contacted by investigator John Ferguson and asked to confirm if at any time if I have noticed bruising on my chest or torso as a consequence of the assault upon me by Shekubayo on the 3rd of May. I have not seen nor have I had photographs taken of any such injury or bruising to my chest area or torso. And so there was no, we don't have any photographs of bruising or injuries to your torso or your chest. Are there any such photographs?
No.
No. All right, thank you. Can I ask you about the 4th of May, please? So let's turn to paragraphs 44 to 46 of your witness inquiry statement. And these relate to Dr. Smead. Right there, and you'll see Dr. Smead, and you were asked to comment on what I told Dr. Smead on the 4th of May. So this is the day after. And you've looked at statements, and you went back to A&E on Monday the 4th of May because you felt almost constantly drunk and you were in a lot of pain. Can you tell us a little bit about that? So this is the day after.
Yeah. I felt dizzy, not myself. My speech was different. I developed a stutter, which I'd never had a stutter in my life. And none of what I was feeling was by any means normal to me, and it worried me considering I did have a knock to the head. Yeah, so that's why I'd essentially woke up with new symptoms, if that makes sense, and they concerned me.
And so you went back to A&E. Was this after a call to NHS 24?
Yeah.
And you were given painkillers and information, a leaflet about head injuries. And then can we move on to paragraphs 47 to 48? And you talk about going to your GP, Dr. Erica Ellison, on the 5th of May, so that's the next day along. And you spoke to your GP in relation to how you were feeling that day. And then I think you took a photograph on that day. Can we look at Perk 255, I think it may be? Although I might be wrong about that. No. Oh, sorry, Perk 01300. And it looks like you're sitting in a car.
Yeah.
Right. And is this the photograph that you took after your appointment with the GP on the 5th of May?
Yeah.
Right. And that was to, what were you hoping to show with that photograph? What was your plan?
I felt like the right side of my face was swollen. I was beginning to notice like a kind of facial droop, but it really was the swelling to the right side of my face. And like I say, this was the Tuesday, and on that day I woke up with another new symptom again, which again worried me, given that I'd been punched to the head. And then I had swelling. I just thought, I'm gonna...
What was the new symptom that you woke up with?
The swelling to the right side of my face.
That was the symptom?
Yeah.
Right, sorry. And then on the 10th of May, again, did you contact NHS 24 and then go back to speak to a Dr. Speakman at the hospital?
Yeah.
And if we look at paragraphs 50 to 52 of your statement, you've explained to the chair about how you were feeling that day and what you said to Dr. Christopher Speakman at the hospital. And in his statement, he says that you told him you'd been stamped on your head. Do you want to explain?
Yeah, I can't obviously speak for Dr. Speakman, but I mean, that's never been my position. So I don't know if he's picked me up wrong, but it's never been my position that my head was stamped on, because that's not information I was told.
Okay, thank you. And then can I ask you to look at Perk 253, please? So this is the statement of the 13th of May. So that was the first one. And if we could look at page 5, please. Paragraph 3. And you're talking about your face didn't feel right for the whole week, and then Sunday the 10th of May, you were having a conversation with your parents, and you said the right hand side of your face didn't feel right, and it looked like it had drooped. And you called NHS 24 and then organised an out-of-hours emergency appointment. And you were admitted to Kirkcaldy Hospital and kept in overnight and given a CT scan. So was that the first scan that you'd had?
Yes.
Right. And then the statement in paragraph 4 says, I asked the wee Pakistani doctor, whose surname began with an S, that if the scan came back normal, what had caused my face to droop. And I'm really interested in your use of the expression there, wee Pakistani doctor. Do you want to say anything about your use of language there?
I can only say that at that point I must have been asked for a description. At that point, because I was badly concussed, I was struggling with words, and I'm afraid that has been my best way of describing that gentleman. Would I describe him as that now? No, I'm 7 years on in my recovery, and I would choose a different way to describe him. But at that point in time, with a head injury, struggling with words, that's the language I came out with, it wasn't meant to cause any form of offence. I was just trying my best at that time.
Thank you. And can I say paragraphs 53 and 54 of your inquiry statement, you have referred to Dr. Siddiqui, and this is the name, Dr. Ali Siddiqui. He was the doctor that you saw on the 11th of May. Right. Thank you. And you also refer to seeing a Dr. Catherine Pollock at paragraph 54 on the same day. You've no recollection
No.
of any dealings with Dr. Pollock, though?
Not that I can remember.
All right. And then can I ask you about the 21st of May? And you'll see paragraph 55 and 56. You then talk about Mr. Ian Anderson, and is he the consultant
Yes.
that you were later sent to see?
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that it was only on the 3rd of May that you saw doctors where you, prior to actually being told anything by Miss P.C. Tomlinson about being stamped or being unconscious?
Yeah.
So all of these other doctors after that date, you'd been told things by a colleague?
Yeah.
And again, insofar as there's any difference between your version and the doctors or medical practitioners, in relation to any medical views, you don't have anything to say about that?
No.
Thank you. I'd like to ask some questions about race now. Are you able to carry on, or
Yeah.
do you need a little break? You
Yeah,
okay?
no, thanks.
Can we go back to the early part of your evidence this morning? You talked about the 2 previous knife incidents. Can I just ask you, was there anything else about, when you think about those 2 incidents and you compare it to the incident on the 3rd of May with Mr. Bayo, was there anything else that was different between the previous 2 incidents and this incident that you know, can you explain further the comparison between the 2?
Yeah, the first one, first comparison I would make is there was absolutely no verbal communication in response to the commands that were given to Mr. Bayo, and that's the thing that struck me as most unusual, and probably the alarm bells ringing first of all, because, like I've stated before, I always got some sort of response, whether it was, you know, a rant about what had happened, or abuse, or just simply just abuse. But with Mr. Bayo, there was just nothing. It was like nothing was kind of going in, if that makes sense. Give me a minute, sorry.
I don't want to interrupt you if
No, it's okay.
you're trying to remember something else.
I know.
Right.
Go for it.
Now, you've said with the 2 previous knife incidents, they didn't involve black men. This one obviously did. Was there anything about the fact it involved a black man, Mr. Bayo, that made you more fearful or feel differently about the incident?
No, his race had absolutely nothing to do with this, with how we handled the call or anything like that. My biggest concern was the numerous calls we'd had from members of the public stating that there was a man in possession of a knife, and that was reinstated over and over again with each additional phone call or 999 call that came in. And then, like I said, the lack of communication, the lack of the spray working, and how it unfolded. But no, it had absolutely nothing to do with the colour of his skin.
Can you remember now, prior to the 3rd of May 2015, how often you'd had to deal with a black man where you'd attended an incident and it involved a black man?
I don't think I had.
I think you've probably answered this question, but was there anything about the way you responded to the incident and the options you chose that all were altered or different because he was black?
Not at all.
Do you remember now what training, if any, you'd received on equality and diversity prior to May 2015?
Yeah, when I was at the police college in my initial training, we spent a week at Tullyallen on it was diversity training, and then throughout my career, we were given performance development reviews, whereby if you had exhibited any sort of inappropriate behaviour in any way, shape or form, that is when it would be noted, and especially in your probation too, and also throughout your career working on the shift or wherever you were.
And had you ever had that issue raised at any of these performance development reviews?
Never.
And I understand you were up to date on your training.
Yeah.
By May 2015. I mean, at that time, was there ever a time when someone's physical characteristics, like their skin colour or their religion, caused you to make any assumptions so that you put them into some sort of category? For example, a black person is a terrorist.
No.
On your training courses that you'd done, what had you learned about unconscious bias?
I have to say I can't recall word for word the training we received at Tullyallen now, but I can tell you that the recruitment process to get into what at that time was Fife Constabulary, there was processes put in place. In fact, I can't remember if it was on computers. I'm sure it was. But it was designed to root out and identify anything such as unconscious bias. Mm-hmm. They would give you scenarios and, give different ethnicities in the same scenario, and, well, how would you deal with it? For example, if it was a white man, and how would you deal with it if it was somebody from a different ethnic background? And then that was designed, to my knowledge, to root out anybody who did have that unconscious bias.
And during that process, were you able to identify any unconscious biases that you had?
No.
And when you think about the things you learned on those courses in equality and diversity, how did you implement those learning points into your everyday work?
Well, I mean, as a person, anyway, I would always treat people as they come type thing, and I would like to think that if I was ever at a call and I maybe didn't know the answer to something, I would take the time to ask the question to the person, so that I would get it right and without causing any offence. But ultimately, through experience, picking up on different cultures and things like that, you're constantly learning in a job like the police. You're constantly learning, and yeah.
So if you were first on the scene,
Mm-hmm.
to a knife call
Mhm.
and you see a person there, you can't see a knife, is the first thing you would have done was communicate with them
Mhm.
and try and find out more about them,
Yeah.
what the problem is,
Mhm.
whether they have any sharp implements,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Yeah.
So you would have relied on your communication skills.
Yeah.
And you'd had training in that.
Yeah.
So even if the person was of a different ethnicity,
Mhm.
you would have still endeavoured to do that part.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about Kirkcaldy Police Office in 2015? Had you ever come across any examples in your working life at that time? I know you said you'd only been there 2 months. Of any racial discrimination there?
No.
No. Do you ever heard anyone make racist jokes or comments?
No.
If you had come across something like that, how would you have reacted?
Well, I would challenge them. Plain and simple.
And when you say challenge them, what would you have done?
Mhm. Well, whatever it is that they, maybe said that was incorrect or something, I would point them in the right direction of what is appropriate.
And for the senior officers or the supervisors in Kirkcaldy Police Office at that time, do you think that's how they would have responded? Or do you think they would have challenged that type of behaviour, racist comments or jokes?
Yeah.
And had you ever seen any of the colleagues on your team exhibit any behaviour of that sort?
Never, no.
Can I ask you about concerns about use of force by the police? So at the time of May 2015, what awareness, if any, did you have about public concern about the use of force by police officers, particularly against black men? Were you aware of public concerns at that time?
The only thing that's come into my memory is concerns, obviously, now. But, I mean, I like to, when I was a serving police officer, I made a point of watching the news and things like that. So I'd like to think that I was aware of current affairs and things like that.
So if there were things happening down south, for example, you would have been aware of that from watching news programmes?
Yeah.
And from your own experience in Kirkcaldy, was it an issue of concern for Police Scotland and in Kirkcaldy generally, the use of force by officers against black people?
No, it's not something I can ever say I came across or...
Right. We may hear about other quite high-profile deaths down in England regarding the use of restraint, particularly if someone's face down, particularly if someone's black. And looking back now, do you remember there being much information sharing? If learning points existed from cases down south, was there much sharing of that information up here with officers from Police Scotland?
I honestly can't remember. Sorry, I don't know.
In 2015, what was your understanding or awareness of the black community in Kirkcaldy?
I can't remember. I don't know. Sorry.
Had you at that time been involved in any community relation work with the black community in Kirkcaldy?
No.
Are you aware of any other officers in your team or more widely in Kirkcaldy being engaged in community work with the black community?
No.
You've told us earlier that you hadn't dealt with previous incidents where the person who was there when you attend an incident was black. What experience at that time did you have of the black community in Kirkcaldy?
As I say, I'd only been there 2 months, so I didn't attend a call involving a black person until the call on the 3rd of May.
Right. Had you come across them in relation to their status as a witness, perhaps?
No.
Or a victim of crime?
No.
Were you aware at that time of any tensions between members of the black community and the police in Kirkcaldy?
No.
Are you aware of sort of stereotypes that exist around black people, specifically in the context of criminal justice? For example, are you aware that black men may be perceived as having superhuman strength or size?
No.
Or being more likely to resist and not be compliant?
No, I don't.
Did you have any assumptions along those lines?
No.
So, we referred earlier to Perk 253, your very first statement, and you described Mr. Bayo as deranged with superhuman strength and, in my mind, intent on killing someone. Was that based on any perceived stereotype of him being a black man with superhuman strength?
No, not at all. It's an accurate account of what I came across on that morning. And those memories will stay with me forever now.
And we've heard of that Mr. Bayo described as being the size of a house, not by you.
Yeah.
Is that the type of view that you held?
To be honest, he was the most muscular man I've ever seen, like face to face. And the whole time that I was a serving police officer, I don't think I've ever came across anybody who was built like him.
So the difference was his physique, his muscles.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the tallest man you've seen. He's not the heaviest man you've seen, but he was muscular.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm 5'1", so anything over that is bigger to me.
Okay. And I think earlier I asked you about a phrase in one of your statements that you'd never ever seen a more frightening, crazy man in your life. And again, do you think that was based on any stereotype or any assumption?
No, not at all. It's how I felt in that situation with that presented on front of me.
Had you dealt with incidents where you attended and the person was on drink or drugs, under the influence, heavily under the influence?
Yeah, I mean, I'd attended calls with people under the influence, absolutely, but this was like a whole new level. I'd never ever dealt with or seen before in my police career.
So of any other incidents where the person was on drugs or
Yeah.
drunk, under the influence of drink, you hadn't considered them to be as frightening or as crazy as Mr. Bayo?
No, because I want to add that they communicated back with us. You know, when we attended, like the example I gave you about the 2 knives, it was a 14-year-old boy and he was using the handles of the knives to smash windows. And immediately when we turned up, it was the same clear commands, spray, you know, hands there, clear commands, put the knives down constantly, put them down. And as it stood, he flung them up in the air and towards us, if that makes sense. But that is where it de-escalated. The danger of the knives was out of his possession, and then he was brought into police custody, and that was what made it more frightening, or the initial. That's what made it frightening when we turned up and he just was not, there was nothing there, nothing seemed to be kind of sinking in or registering, if you like.
If Mr. Bio had been white when you arrived at Hayfield Road, even given the scene that you saw when you arrived, would you have attempted to communicate with him and de-escalate the situation?
It would have been the same approach regardless of his skin colour. I can't emphasise enough how much that wasn't a factor in the way that we approached Mr. Bio. The thing at the forefront of my mind was that I had no reason to disbelieve that we were going to reports of a man in possession of a knife. And I'll be honest, I just didn't want to turn up to an innocent member of the public having been hurt. And I really cared about that. When I was serving, I used to picture scenarios in my own life, like I have 2 younger brothers, and I thought, oh, that could be one of my brothers walking to work, or that could be another one maybe coming back from being out on the Saturday night or staying at his friends. And that's all I could think of, was that equivalent to somebody else's family member coming across that. And that is what was at the forefront in my mind, is that I didn't want an innocent person coming across that. I wanted to stop that and preserve life.
So looking back now to the 3rd of May 2015, is there anything you would change about the way you acted that day or the choices you made?
No.
And looking back now, is there anything you can think of that would indicate that Mr. Bio's race played a role in the choices you made?
Not at all.
Or in the choices that anyone else made?
No.
Could you give me one moment, please? Thank you very much. I've completed.
With the exception of the Dean of Faculty, are there any Rule 9 applications at this stage? No, there's Mr. Scullion, Miss Mitchell, and Mr. Moore. And I wonder if the witness could be taken out to the witness room, please. Now, Miss Mitchell, would you come to the table, please? Now, Ms. Mitchell, I'm concerned that this witness does have certain vulnerabilities, and I would require to be satisfied in terms of the various provisions of Rule 9 before I would allow any questioning. So could you address me on that?
I can. The first matter, my Lord, is a matter of clarification in terms of Rule 9. And the issue is in relation to the witness indicating that she said she'd been, others had told her that she'd been knocked unconscious. And then she explained that Dr. Mitchell discounted the possibility of being unconscious because she couldn't remember many of the details of the incident. And what I would like to ask in the first part of my question is when these details came back to her. So I'd like to know if and when her memory changed to revert to being such that she had more clarity around what happened.
Can you take me to the transcript that deals with this, please?
Oh, I shall try, my Lord. That's it, yes. It's 132. Lord, it's at 132.3. I'm obliged to Miss Pang.
132.
0.3. And as we can see from there, it's being read out to her paragraph 23. And she's confirming that that's her evidence.
Where does she say anything about her memory there?
I'm looking at something that starts line 9, which is a quote from paragraph 23 of her statement. Dr. Mitchell, discounting the possibility, I would state the following. In actual fact, I couldn't remember many of the details of the incident, and because of my mental state, I didn't realise it whilst in hospital. Now, we have very clear examples from her statement of the detail of when she was down on the ground. And in particular, I can take the inquiry to 2 police statements where she gives a detailed, conscious comment about what was happening on the ground at that time. And if she's saying that she can't remember much of the detail of the incident, I would like to know if and when those details came back to her, and to show her PERC Statement 254 and 255, where it's very clear that she has significant detail of just post or just arriving on the ground and what she was thinking at that time.
Now, anything else you were applying?
So that is the issue around her memory. The second issue is a matter which arose when she gave evidence, where she said that when she saw the struggle ongoing with 3 officers, she thought that he was just about overcoming them. And she said she was horrified because she had a genuine belief that he was going to get up and finish her off. And of course, she had the opportunity to see what was happening, and is a witness who comes to this from a different perspective than those people who had hands on Mr. Bio and were there. And I would wish to ask her, and I can say that he had been PAVA sprayed, he had been CS sprayed, and he had 3 men holding him down.
Sorry, can somebody pick up that again? You wish to ask her?
Yes, I wish to ask, just to put that in context, that Mr. Bio had been PAVA sprayed, he'd been CS sprayed. He had 3 men holding him down, men described as the 3 of the biggest guys on the shift. Do you think he might have been struggling to breathe? So that's the question I would like to ask.
Is there anything else?
Yes, my lord. The last issue is in relation to race, and that is a question on. We heard there was no training on unconscious bias, but I would like to ask whether or not there was any training on racial stereotyping. Whether or not she had any training on the use of language in relation to race. For example, how she would describe people, and the example that I can give there is the word coloured. Not suggesting this witness does, but using that as an example of a description which isn't appropriate. And whether or not she's had any training on guarding against unconscious bias or racial stereotyping. And finally, in that regard, we're aware from a PERC report, that's PERC, I think PERC 3, that during a period of time in Fife Division, which I believe is 2014, there was an incident where there were people had been sent or received texts of a racial nature, and that was in Fife Constabulary, and she'd said that she'd never heard of racism or heard racism herself or heard of it, and I was wanting to ask her whether or not she'd heard of that incident.
Does that complete all your matters?
It does, my lord.
If you would perhaps return to your desk then, please, and Mr. Scullion, if you would come to the table. Yes, Mr. Scullion.
It relates to a Rule 9 application, and Senior Counsel asked the witness about a meeting which took place on 18th May 2015 when DCI Hardy and DI Wilson attended at the witness's home address in order to obtain a statement. The witness confirmed that she was asked to provide a statement and refused to provide a statement based on legal advice and because at that stage her status was unknown. There are 2 points that I would wish to clarify. The first is whether she was aware or was informed at that time that DCI Hardy and DI Wilson were there to note a statement on behalf of the PERC. And secondly, whether DCI Hardy and DI Wilson told her at that time that her status was that of witness.
That's the only matter, is it?
That's it.
Thank you. If you'd return and Mr. Moyer come to the table. Yes, Mr. Moyer.
Sir, as you may be aware, CRER provided the Counsel to the Inquiry with an extensive document to assist in asking questions on race, and largely she's been following a large part of that. The issue that I would wish to raise, there's 2 issues actually. The first issue follows on from the reference to the wee Pakistani doctor that Counsel to the Inquiry raised. The follow-on question to that reply that I would like to ask is what led her to believe that the doctor was Pakistani in the first place? Because what we're dealing with in some extent here, sir, is unconscious racism or unconscious bias. And what we have here is a reference to a doctor being a Pakistani. Was it based on his skin colour? Was it based on his accent? Was it based on his name? So that's the first question, sir. The second question I would wish to raise comes from the reference to her attending an incident which involved a knife, where I think the youth was said to be using the knife to break windows, the heel end of the knife. Bearing in mind in this case we have an incident where firearms officers, a dog unit and a large number of officers attended. The question I would like to ask is on that incident, was that an incident that a large number of officers were ordered to attend, or did it simply involve a couple of patrol officers? Now, it may be, of course, they came across this incident and it wasn't it wasn't a knife incident prior to it. But again, I would like to know what the background to that incident was, and that's something that's simply been raised today as well, sir. And that is the two questions I would wish to raise.
Thank you. Well, I'll rise to consider these submissions. Well, in relation to the first matter raised by Miss Mitchell as to when the details in the witness's perk statements came back to her, these statements are available to me as evidence. They have been explored with the witness. In assessing their credibility and reliability, I can take into account her evidence that at the hospital she could not remember many of the details of the incident. Against that background, I do not consider that it's necessary or that it would assist me to revisit the matter at this stage. In relation to the second matter, as to whether Mr. Bio might have had difficulty breathing, it seems to me that this is a matter of great importance to the inquiry. But it is a matter which will be a matter of inference from the totality of the evidence in relation to restraint. And the evidence of this witness will be part of that. I do not consider that asking this witness further detail in relation to what she has already described would assist the inquiry. In relation to racial stereotyping, the use of language in relation to race, the witness has already made reference to her training. The inquiry will have her training record, and the inquiry will in due course be exploring in detail training in this area. In these circumstances, in the light of the extensive examination of this area carried out by senior counsel to the inquiry, I do not consider that it would assist the inquiry to explore this further with the witness. I shall allow Mr. Scullion to ask questions about the points that he wishes. In relation to the points raised by Mr. Moyer, I shall allow Mr. Moyer to explore the matter in relation to the doctor, but in relation to the second matter, I do not think that it would assist the inquiry to explore the details of the earlier incident further. So, Mr. Scullion, would you come to the table, please?
I've only got a couple of matters to ask you about.
Okay.
Earlier you were asked about a meeting which took place on 18th May 2015 where DCI Hardy and DI Wilson visited you at your home address. Do you remember being asked about that?
Yeah.
And do you remember that meeting?
I remember them coming to my house, yeah.
And I think earlier you confirmed that you were asked to provide a statement at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that you refused to provide a statement on the basis of legal advice and because at that stage your status wasn't known. Do you remember giving that evidence?
Yeah, I remember.
At the meeting on 18th May 2015, do you remember if you were told that DCI Hardy and DI Wilson were there to note a statement on behalf of the PERC?
I can't remember.
And during the course of that meeting, did they tell you that at that time your status was that of witness?
I can't remember. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scullion. Mr. Meyer?
Good afternoon. You'll remember the counsel to the inquiry asked you a question about the comment you made in your PERC statement about the wee Pakistani doctor. Do you remember that?
I remember seeing it, yeah.
Yeah. And you gave an explanation as to why you'd used that terminology, and it's something you regretted you wouldn't use nowadays. I wanted to ask, what led you to believe that the doctor you were dealing with was of Pakistani heritage at all? Was it based on their accent, their name, their skin colour? What caused you to think that they were of Pakistani heritage?
Well, for a start, I want to expand on that, in that that to me looks like I've been asked to provide a description, and of the man. I don't know if the guy noting my statement asked me that. As I said at the time, I was suffering from concussion, and one of the many symptoms of that is struggling to find words. I noticed that it's not contained in any other statement that I've given. It only seems to appear in this one. Why that is, as I've said, because of my memory, I don't know. The only explanation I can give, if indeed the words that I've used, is that at the time I was struggling to find my words because of concussion.
That was really the question I was asking. What led you to believe at that time that the doctor was of Pakistani heritage? If you were struggling to find words, why was it you thought to yourself, this doctor is of Pakistani heritage? If you were asked to describe him, for example, you described him as a wee Pakistani doctor, and I'm not really interested in that, but I'm interested in why you described him as of Pakistani heritage at all.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Because I was concussed, I can't actually tell you right here, right now, if those were indeed the words that I used. But what I can say is that sort of language and description and things like that doesn't appear in any more of my evidence, any more of the numerous statements that I've given. So, I mean, the person noting that statement, I don't know if that was maybe a term that they had used. I realise I've signed the statement, but can I physically sit here and say to you, those words came out of my mouth? No, I can't.
So in the PERC statement, which is PERC 00253, you're not certain you used the words, the wee Pakistani doctor, at all?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. If you return to your seat, please. Dean of Faculty.
My Lord, I'm obliged. No qualification required from me.
Thank you. Ms. Short, thank you for coming to give evidence to the inquiry. That's the end of your evidence, and you're now free to go.
Thank you, sir.
You can return to the witness room. Now, Ms. Graham, I think I'm right in saying that tomorrow, for administrative reasons, we are having a different timetable.
That's correct. We will start at 1 o'clock and continue, as I understand it, until 5.
Yes.
And I will intend to call PC Tomlinson.
Thank you. Well, a change, for administrative reasons, a change in the pattern of the day tomorrow. We'll start at 1 p.m. and we'll sit until 5 o'clock. Thank you. Tribunal, the inquiry will now adjourn.